And that, my dear Xeno friends, is why you should never, ever give a human unrestricted access to your food replicators. Captain Zax Thor finished with a flourish, his tentacles waving dramatically as he addressed the rapt audience of various alien species gathered in the rec room of Starbase Zeta-9. The assembled aliens gasped, mandibles clicking and eye stalks swiveling in alarm. A chorus of concerned chirps, whistles, and gurgles filled the air as they processed this apparently terrifying information about their newly arrived human neighbors. In the back of the room, hidden behind a potted Regalian flame fern, two humans struggled to contain their laughter. "Oh man, did you hear that load of bull?" Sarah started to say, before dissolving into silent giggles. "Sheesh," Mike hissed, elbowing her in the ribs. "We don't want them to know we're here. This is comedy gold." They peered through the leaves, watching as Captain Zax Thor fielded increasingly panicked questions from the crowd. "But surely the humans cannot be that dangerous," a timid voice piped up. It belonged to a small, furry creature that looked like the unholy offspring of a hamster and a sea anemone. Zax Thor's eye stalks swiveled ominously. "Oh, my sweet summer child," he intoned gravely, "you have no idea. Why, just last week, I heard about a human who hacked a food replicator on Outpost Gamma 12. Do you know what happened?" The hamster anemone shook its head, trembling slightly. "Boom!" Zax Thor shouted suddenly, causing half the room to jump. The madman programmed it to create something called a ghost pepper. The resulting explosion of capsaicin vaporized 3 decks and left the entire station tasting spicy for a month. Sarah had to stuff her fist in her mouth to keep from cackling out loud. Mike was shaking with silent laughter beside her. "It's true," a reedy voice chimed in. This came from a tall, stick-thin alien that resembled nothing so much as a sentient coat rack. "I heard humans can drink poison for fun. They call it alcohol, and it makes them temporarily insane." This set off another round of alarmed murmuring from the crowd. Indeed, Zax Thor nodded sagely. Their favorite pastime is ingesting mind-altering substances and then operating heavy machinery. It's a miracle their species survived long enough to achieve spaceflight. By this point, Sarah and Mike were in physical pain from holding in their laughter. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she clutched her sides. "We have to do something," Mike wheezed when he could finally breathe again. "This is too good an opportunity to pass up." Sarah wiped her eyes, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Mike's answering smile was positively devilish. Operation Deathworld Pranksters is a go. Over the next week, Sarah and Mike put their plan into action. They started small, with little accidents engineered to play into the aliens' ridiculous fears. On Monday, they rigged the rec room door to blast "Welcome to the Jungle" at full volume whenever it opened. The shrieking guitar riff sent a group of skittish Volderani scuttling for cover, convinced they were under attack by sonic weapons. Tuesday saw them reprogramming the food replicators to produce nothing but increasingly spicy variations of curry. By lunchtime, half the station was convinced humans were trying to burn out their taste buds as some kind of dominance display. On Wednesday, they switched out the normal coffee in the officers' lounge for espresso. The resulting caffeine high led to widespread panic about humans weaponizing stimulants to drive other species insane. Thursday was perhaps their crowning achievement. They managed to hack into the station's atmospheric controls and release a small amount of nitrous oxide laughing gas into the ventilation system of the main promenade. The sight of dozens of aliens in fits of uncontrollable giggles led to rumors that humans had developed a terrifying psychic weapon capable of manipulating emotions en masse. By Friday, the station was in an uproar. Everywhere you looked, aliens were jumping at shadows, eyeing humans with a mixture of fear and awe, and trading increasingly wild rumors about the terrifying capabilities of these Deathworlders. It all came to a head that evening in the Grand Hall. Station Commander Vix NA had called an all-hands meeting to address the growing hysteria. Sarah and Mike slipped in just as things were getting started, taking up position near the back of the crowded room. Commander Vix NA cut an impressive figure as she took the stage. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent scales and 4 arms ending in wickedly sharp claws, she looked every inch the battle-hardened veteran she was. But even she seemed unnerved as she surveyed the agitated crowd. "My fellow sentients," she began, her translator rendering her sibilant speech into Standard Galactic, "I know many of you have concerns about our new human residents. I assure you, the rumors you've been hearing are greatly exaggerated. She was cut off by a cacophony of shouted questions and fearful exclamations. Is it true they drink acid for fun? I heard they can regrow limbs. Are they immortal? My cousin's roommate's boss said humans can breathe fire if they eat the right foods. Vixna raised all four hands, trying to calm the crowd. Please, everyone. I know humans seem strange to us, but I've been assured they pose no danger to. That's what they want you to think. The shout came from near the back of the room. All eyes turned to see Captain Zaxthor pushing his way to the front, waving his tentacles frantically. Commander, with all due respect, you're being naive. These humans are unlike anything we've ever encountered. Did you know they evolved on a planet with 10,000 volts of electricity regularly falling from the sky? Their bones are reinforced with metal just so they don't shatter under their homeworld's cruel gravity. A wave of fearful murmurs swept through the crowd. Vixna looked taken aback, her scales shifting to a paler hue. I wasn't aware of that, she admitted. But surely, and that's not even the worst of it, Zaxthor plowed on. Their planet is teeming with creatures even more terrifying than they are. Giant razor-toothed beasts that can swallow a Regellian whole. Swarms of tiny monsters that burrow into your skin and lay eggs in your brain. Plants that can move and eat you alive. By now, the assembled aliens were in a state of near panic. Even Commander Vixna looked shaken, her claws clicking together nervously. But the Galactic Council assured us that humans were safe, she protested weakly. They passed all the screening protocols. Zaxthor scoffed. As if our pitiful tests could truly measure creatures like these. Why, I heard that on their homeworld, they willingly jump out of perfectly good aircraft for fun. They strap explosives to their backs and hurl themselves into the void, laughing in the face of certain death. This was too much for the crowd to handle. Aliens began pushing towards the exits, gibbering in terror. We're all doomed. The humans will kill us all. Evacuate the station before it's too late. Commander Vixna looked helplessly at the chaos unfolding before her. She opened her mouth, likely to try one last time to restore order, when suddenly, boom! The sound of an explosion rocked the hall, followed immediately by clouds of multicolored smoke billowing from the ventilation ducts. Strobing lights flashed, and an unholy screech that sounded like a cross between heavy metal and a dying Gorflaxian swamp beast blared from the speakers. In there, descending from the ceiling on cables, were two figures dressed in outlandish costumes that seemed to be a mishmash of every alien's worst nightmare of what a human might look like. Sarah, done up in fake horns, glowing red contact lenses, and what appeared to be a suit made of writhing tentacles, let out a maniacal laugh as she swung through the air. Greetings, puny aliens, she boomed, her voice amplified to bone-shaking volumes. We are the humans, come to claim this station as our new party palace. Beside her, Mike cut an equally terrifying figure. He'd somehow rigged up a costume that made it look like his head was on fire, and he appeared to be riding a smaller version of one of the razor-toothed beasts Zaxthor had been raving about moments before. That's right, he bellowed. Prepare yourselves for activities so extreme, they'll literally melt your faces off. Who's ready for some Deathworld fun? The reaction was instantaneous and absolute. Aliens scattered in every direction, screaming in terror. They clambered over each other in a mad dash for the exits, leaving behind a trail of dropped possessions, molted scales, and in a few cases, entire exoskeletons that had been abandoned in sheer panic. Within minutes, the grand hall was empty save for Sarah, Mike, and a very confused-looking Commander Vixna. As the smoke cleared and the music faded, Sarah and Mike touched down on the stage. They pulled off their masks, revealing faces red from laughter and exertion. Oh man, Sarah wheezed, doubling over. Did you see their faces? I thought that little fuzzy guy was going to faint. Mike was laughing so hard he could barely speak. The one with all the eye stalks, he gasped. I swear 3 of them popped right off when you started swinging down. They turned to Commander Vixna, who was staring at them with an expression that somehow managed to convey shock, outrage, and dawning realization all at once. This was all a joke, she finally managed to sputter. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances, then burst into fresh peals of laughter. Of course it was, Sarah exclaimed, wiping tears from her eyes. Come on, did you really think humans were some kind of unstoppable death machines? But Captain Zaxthor said. Vixna trailed off, her scales shifting through a kaleidoscope of confused colors. Mike rolled his eyes. Yeah, about that. Zax Thor's been spreading wild stories ever since we got here. We figured it was time to teach him and everyone else a little lesson about believing everything you hear. Vixnar's expression hardened. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused? The panic you've created? I ought to have you both thrown in the brig and... She was cut off by the sound of slow, deliberate clapping coming from the back of the hall. All three turned to see a tall, distinguished-looking alien striding towards them. He had the bearing of someone used to command, and the ornate insignia on his uniform marked him as a very high-ranking official indeed. "Bravo," he said as he reached the stage. "Bravo indeed. That was quite a performance." Vix NR snapped to attention. "Admiral Zorn." "Sir, I can explain." Admiral Zorn waved a dismissive tentacle. "At ease, Commander. I think our human friends here have done us all a great service." Sarah and Mike exchanged puzzled glances. This was not the reaction they'd been expecting. Zorn turned to address them directly. "You must be Sarah Chen and Michael O'Brien. I've heard quite a bit about you two since you arrived on the station." Yes, sir," Sarah replied cautiously. "Look, if this is about the thing with the anti-grav units in the gym, we can totally explain." The Admiral chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Oh no, nothing like that. Though I must say, watching Senior Diplomat Gorex XL trying to unstick himself from the ceiling was the highlight of my week." His expression grew more serious. "No, I'm talking about this little prank of yours. Do you realize what you've done?" Mike gulped. Caused a mass panic and possibly violated about 50 station regulations, demonstrated the dangers of unchecked rumor-mongering and xenophobia in a multicultural environment," Sarah ventured. Both True Zorn nodded. "But more importantly, you've shown us a fatal flaw in our security protocols." Now it was Vixnay's turn to look confused. "Sir," Zorn began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Think about it. In less than a week, two relatively junior crew members, newcomers to the station, no less managed to wreak absolute havoc. They manipulated our systems, spread disinformation, and very nearly caused a full-scale evacuation. And they did it all without anyone catching on until it was too late." He stopped, fixing them all with a penetrating stare. If this had been a real attack, say, by Pyrian separatists or the Zygon Collective, we would have been completely unprepared. Our residents panicked at the first sign of trouble, our command structure crumbled under pressure, and our security measures were easily bypassed. Vixnar's scales had turned a deep, embarrassed purple. I never thought of it that way, sir." "A few of us did," Zorn replied. "We've grown complacent out here on the frontier. It took a couple of humans with a twisted sense of humor to show us just how vulnerable we really are." He turned back to Sarah and Mike, who were looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Don't misunderstand me. What you did was reckless, irresponsible, and could have had serious consequences. Under normal circumstances, you'd both be on the first transport back to Earth with a permanent ban from Galactic Council space." Sarah and Mike winced, bracing themselves for the axe to fall. But Zorn wasn't finished. However, he continued, a sly gleam in his eye. "These are not normal circumstances, and I believe your unique talents could be put to much better use." Mike blinked in surprise. "Sir, how would you two like to join a special task force?" Zorn asked. "Your job would be to test our defenses, probe for weaknesses, and generally make life miserable for complacent station commanders across the sector. In short, to be professional troublemakers, but this time with the full backing of Galactic Command." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Zorn nodded. "Though, of course, this conversation never happened. Officially, you'll be transferred to a minor diplomatic post on some backwater moon. Your real missions will come directly from me." He extended a hand. "So, what do you say? Ready to put those Deathworlder instincts to work for the greater good?" Sarah and Mike exchanged incredulous glances. Then, slowly, matching grins spread across their faces. Sir Mike said, reaching out to shake the Admiral's hand, "I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." "Excellent," Admiral Zorn rumbled, his tentacles rippling with what might have been amusement. "Report to my office at 08000 tomorrow for your first briefing. And try not to cause any more station-wide panics before then, H&M." As the Admiral strode away, Commander Vixnay finally found her voice. But sir, you can't be serious. These humans, Exactly what we need, Commander Zorn called over his shoulder. Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to show us our own blind spots. I suggest you start thinking about how to improve your station's security protocols. I have a feeling you'll be seeing a lot more surprises in the near future. With that parting shot, he disappeared through the Grand Hall's doors, leaving behind a sputtering Vix-A and two humans who looked like they'd just won the galactic lottery. So Sarah said, turning to Mike with a mischievous glint in her eye. Want to go for one last ride on the anti-grav units before we have to be all official and responsible? Mike's answering grin was all the response she needed. The next morning found Sarah and Mike outside Admiral Zorn's office, both trying and failing to look like serious, responsible adults who definitely hadn't spent the previous night zooming around the station's upper levels on hijacked maintenance drones. You think he knows? Mike whispered, fidgeting with his collar. Sarah snorted. About the drones? Please. We were the very model of discretion. You yelled yippee-ki-yay every time we rounded a corner. Like I said, discretion. Before Mike could retort, the office door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A harried-looking aide, some sort of cephalopod species that seemed to be mostly tentacles and eye stalks, ushered them inside. Admiral Zorn's office was a study in organized chaos. Holographic displays flickered on every available surface, showing everything from ship movements to resource allocation charts. In the center of it all sat the Admiral himself, looking for all the world like he was conducting an invisible orchestra as he manipulated the data streams with practiced ease. "Ah, our troublemakers have arrived," he said without looking up. "Please have a seat, and do try not to touch anything." The last human who visited managed to accidentally declare war on 3 separate star systems. Sarah and Mike gingerly perched on chairs that seemed designed for a species with a very different anatomy than their own. Now then, Zorn continued, finally turning his attention to them. "I suppose you're wondering exactly what this new position of yours entails." The thought had crossed our minds, so Sarah admitted. Zorn's tentacles writhed in what might have been a smile. "Put simply, your job is to be a pain in the ass, but a very specific, very targeted pain in the ass." He waved a limb, and a new hologram sprang to life between them. It showed a sprawling space station, easily 10 times the size of Zeta 9. "This is Nexus Hub, the crown jewel of the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps. Home to over 1 million sentients from 200 different species. It's where the big decisions get made, the deals that shape the fate of entire sectors." Mike whistled, impressed despite himself. "And you want us to? What? Prank them?" In a manner of speaking, Zorn nodded. "Nexus Hub is hosting a major summit next month. Representatives from every major power in the galaxy will be there, including some who aren't exactly friendly to Council interests. We have reason to believe that certain elements might try to use the opportunity to cause trouble." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of trouble are we talking about here?" "The very bad kind," Zorn said grimly. "Think sabotage, assassination attempts, maybe even a full-scale terrorist attack. The problem is, Nexus Hub security is so tight, so regimented, that they've become blind to unconventional threats." "Let me guess," Mike said. "That's where we come in." Zorn's tentacles writhed in approval. "Precisely. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to infiltrate Nexus Hub and expose every security flaw you can find. Use every trick in your book, and I have a feeling your book is quite extensive. Show them just how vulnerable they really are." Sarah and Mike exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Then Sarah turned back to the Admiral, a predatory grin spreading across her face. "When do we start?" 2 weeks later, Sarah and Mike found themselves on a transport shuttle bound for Nexus Hub. Their official cover identities listed them as junior attaches to the Terran diplomatic corps, positions so mind-numbingly boring that most species' eyes glazed over before they could ask any probing questions. "You know," Mike mused as he stared out the viewport at the looming bulk of Nexus Hub, "when I joined Galactic Exploratory Services, I thought I'd be mapping uncharted planets or making first contact with new species. I did not expect to be professional chaos agents for a squid admiral." Sarah snorted. "Please, like you're not loving every minute of this." Before Mike could reply, a chime sounded through the shuttle, indicating they were beginning docking procedures. As they gathered their meager belongings, their real equipment would be smuggled in separately. Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Hey," she said, nudging Mike's shoulder, We've got this, right? I mean, this is a bit bigger than messing with the locals on Zeta 9. Mike gave her a reassuring smile. Are you kidding? We're Deathworlders, remember? Thriving in impossible situations is kind of our whole thing. Sarah rolled her eyes, but seemed comforted nonetheless. Right, Deathworlders. Guess it's time to live up to the hype. As they disembarked onto Nexus Hub, blending seamlessly into the throng of diplomats, merchants, and assorted alien visitors, neither of them noticed the pair of eyes watching them from the shadows. Eyes that belonged to someone who knew exactly who and what they really were. As the game, as they say, was afoot. Their first week on Nexus Hub was spent simply observing, mapping out the rhythms and routines of the massive station. They noted guard patrols, identified key personnel, and generally did their best to look like unremarkable human bureaucrats. It was, quite possibly, the most boring week of Sarah's entire life. I swear she grumbled as they sat in the bustling food court, picking at something that claimed to be a human-style burger, but tasted more like wet cardboard. If I have to file one more report on the trade implications of basic TT honey tariffs, I'm going to lose it. Mike, who was eyeing his own meal with deep suspicion, nodded in sympathy. I hear you. But look, on the bright side, we've got the all clear from Zorn to start Phase 2 tomorrow. Sarah's eyes lit up with unholy glee. Oh, thank God. I've got so many ideas. Did you know they have an entire section dedicated to dangerous Terran foods? I'm thinking we start there. Mike winced. Please tell me you're not planning to weaponize Shuraka again. I still have nightmares about the Zeta 9 incident. P.S. Amateur Hour. Sarah scoffed. I'm thinking bigger. Have you ever heard of something called surströmming? Before Mike could answer, probably for the best, given the queasy look on his face, a commotion near the food court entrance caught their attention. A group of tall, willowy aliens with luminescent skin were arguing loudly with a pair of security officers. But you don't understand, one of the willow aliens was saying, its skin pulsing with agitated patterns of light. The harmony crystals are vital for our delegation's mental well-being. You can't just confiscate them. The security officer, a stocky reptilian with impressively sharp teeth, seemed unimpressed. Station regulations are clear, Ambassador. No unregistered psychoactive substances allowed on board, no exceptions. As the argument escalated, Sarah nudged Mike. Hey, isn't that Ambassador Luminal of the quiescent Concordat? Mike finished, his eyes narrowing. Yeah, and if I remember the briefing correctly, the Concordat's been making noise about pulling out of the Galactic Council. Sarah picked up the thread. Something about incompatible values and spiritual differences. They watched as the security officers began to forcibly escort the quiescent delegation away, the willowy aliens' protests growing increasingly strident. Mike sighed. Well, there goes the neighborhood. You think this is going to complicate things? Sarah's answering grin was positively feral. Oh no, my friend. This is going to make things so much more interesting. The next morning found Sarah and Mike huddled in a maintenance closet, surrounded by an impressive array of decidedly non-regulation equipment. Okay, run it by me one more time, Mike said, as he fiddled with what looked like a cross between a TV remote and a small octopus. Sarah rolled her eyes but complied. It's simple. We use the sonic disruptors to trigger a cascade failure in the primary comm relays. That'll force them to switch to the backup system, which just so happens to run through the same conduits as the environmental controls for the diplomatic quarter. And that's where the, special source comes in, Mike asked, eyeing a canister labeled Danger Biohazard with considerable trepidation. Exactly, Sarah nodded. One little pressure spike in the right place, and presto. Instant chaos. Mike shook his head in grudging admiration. You know, sometimes I forget just how devious that brain of yours can be. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Oh, you say the sweetest things. Sarah batted her eyelashes mockingly. Now come on, we've got a station to terrorize. They slipped out of the closet, blending seamlessly into the morning rush of bureaucrats and support staff. As they made their way towards their first target, Sarah couldn't help but feel a little thrill of excitement. This was what she lived for, the challenge, the adrenaline rush of pulling off the impossible. Of course, that was the moment everything went sideways. They had just rounded a corner when the lights flickered, then died completely. Emergency klaxons began to blare, and the station's AI came online, its artificially calm voice somehow managing to convey a sense of barely contained panic. Attention all personnel. We are experiencing a Level 1 security breach. This is not a drill. Please proceed to your designated safe zones immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sarah and Mike exchanged alarmed glances. This isn't us, right? Mike asked, though he already knew the answer. Sarah shook her head, her earlier excitement replaced by grim determination. No, but I've got a feeling I know who it might be. Come on, we need to get to the command center. As they took off at a run, dodging panicked aliens and the occasional falling debris, neither of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from a nearby alcove and began to follow. The real test, it seemed, was just beginning. Chaos reigned in the corridors of Nexus Hub. Aliens of all shapes and sizes scrambled for safety, their shrieks and bellows adding to the cacophony of alarms and crashing equipment. Through it all, Sarah and Mike pushed doggedly forward, their Deathworlder physiology giving them an edge in the panicked crowd. You know, Mike panted as they rounded another corner, narrowly avoiding a collision with a gelatinous blob that might have been a senior diplomat. When we said we wanted to liven things up, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Sarah didn't bother to reply, her attention focused on the datapad she'd borrowed from an abandoned security station. Her fingers flew over the screen, bypassing firewalls and security protocols with practiced ease. Got it, she said grimly. Looks like the primary reactor's gone into meltdown. If we don't stabilize it in the next 20 minutes. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what a reactor breach would mean for a station this size. Okay, Mike said, his earlier levity replaced by steely resolve. What's the plan? Sarah's eyes narrowed as she studied the station schematics. We need to get to the main engineering bay. From there, we might be able to manually override the reactor shutdown. Might. Hey, I'm making this up as I go along. You got any better ideas? Before Mike could answer, a new voice cut through the chaos, a voice that sent chills down both their spines. Well. If it isn't Anthropic's pet troublemakers. They spun to find themselves face to face with a figure that seemed to melt out of the shadows. Tall and lithe, with jet black skin that seemed to absorb light, the newcomer regarded them with an expression of amused contempt. Shit, Sarah breathed. Umbra. Mike tensed beside her, his hand inching towards the concealed weapon at his hip. Friend of yours. Hardly Umbra purred, his voice like silk over steel. Let's just say we've crossed paths before. Though I must admit, I'm surprised to see you here. I thought Zorn would have better sense than to send a couple of human pranksters to thwart my plans. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the implications. Umbra was bad news, a notorious information broker and saboteur with ties to half a dozen extremist groups. If he was here. The reactor, she said, the pieces clicking into place. You're the one who sabotaged it. But why? What could you possibly gain from destroying Nexus Hub? Umbra's smile was all teeth. Oh, my dear, who said anything about destroying it? Sometimes, a little chaos is all it takes to shift the balance of power. With lightning speed, he lashed out, knocking the datapad from Sarah's hands. As Mike moved to intercept, Umbra seemed to blur, reappearing behind them in a display of alien agility that left them both reeling. I'd love to stay and chat, he called over his shoulder as he melted back into the shadows, but I have a reactor to stabilize. Can't have my bargaining chip going up in smoke, after all. Do try to keep up. For a moment, Sarah and Mike stood frozen, the implications of Umbra's words sinking in. Then, as one, they sprang into action. After him, Sarah yelled, already sprinting down the corridor. If he gets to that reactor first. Mike didn't need to hear the rest. They both knew the stakes had just gotten a whole lot higher. As they raced through the bowels of Nexus Hub, dodging panicked aliens and malfunctioning equipment, Sarah couldn't help but feel a perverse sense of exhilaration. This, she realized, was what being a Deathworlder was really about. Not just surviving impossible odds, but thriving in the face of them. And as the clock ticked down and the fate of millions hung in the balance, she knew one thing for certain. This was going to be one hell of a story to tell back on Zeta 9. The chase through Nexus Hub's labyrinthine corridors was a blur of flashing emergency lights and blaring alarms. Sarah and Mike pushed themselves to their limits, their Deathworlder physiology giving them an edge as they vaulted over debris and squeezed through half-closed bulkheads. But Umbra always seemed to be one step ahead, a shadow flickering just out of reach. How? Is he? So fast Mike punted as they skidded around another corner, nearly colliding with a group of panicked Exlerbian diplomats. Sarah didn't waste breath on a reply, her eyes scanning the corridor ahead for any sign of their quarry. The distant rumble of the destabilizing reactor sent vibrations through the deck plates beneath their feet, a constant reminder of the ticking clock they faced. Suddenly, Sarah skidded to a halt, throwing out an arm to stop Mike. "Wait. Look," she pointed to a barely visible seam in the wall and access hatch, cleverly disguised to blend in with the surrounding paneling. "Maintenance tunnels," she grinned, already working to pry the hatch open. "Bet you anything that's how our shadowy friend is moving around so quickly." Mike raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Those tunnels weren't designed for humanoid species. We could get stuck." Sarah's grin turned feral. "What's the matter? Afraid of a little tight squeeze? Come on, Deathworlder, where's your sense of adventure?" Before Mike could protest further, she had the hatch open and was wiggling her way into the cramped space beyond. With a resigned sigh, he followed. The maintenance tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare, a twisting, turning maze of pipes and conduits barely wide enough for them to crawl through. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone and lubricant, and more than once they had to backtrack to avoid dead ends or sections too narrow to pass. But Sarah's hunch paid off. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they emerged into a vast, cavernous space that could only be the main engineering bay. And there, hunched over a control panel near the pulsing heart of the reactor, was Umbra. "Well," the shadowy figure drawled without looking up, "I must say I'm impressed. Not many could have followed me through those tunnels. You humans really are full of surprises." Sarah and Mike spread out, trying to flank Umbra without getting too close to the dangerously unstable reactor core. "Step away from the controls," Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Whatever you're planning, it's not worth the lives of everyone on this station." Umbra's laugh was like ice water down their spines. "Oh, my dear, that's where you're wrong. The lives on this station are precisely what make this worth it." With a final flourish, he input a command into the panel. The reactor's ominous rumbling subsided, replaced by the steady hum of normal operations. Mike blinked in surprise. "You fixed it. But I thought that I was trying to destroy the station." Umbra finished, finally turning to face them. His alien features were set in an expression of smug satisfaction. "Please, I'm a professional, not some crazed terrorist. Destruction is so inelegant." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then what was all this about?" "The sabotage, the chase." Umbra spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire engineering bay. "A test, my dear. A test that Nexus Hub has failed spectacularly." As if on cue, the main doors to the engineering bay burst open. A squad of heavily armed security officers poured in, led by none other than Admiral Zorn himself. "Stand down, all of you," Zorn bellowed, his tentacles writhing with agitation. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, to Sarah and Mike's utter astonishment, Umbra casually strolled over to stand beside the Admiral. "Excellent timing. As always," Zorn, Umbra said, his tone suddenly businesslike. "I trust you've been monitoring the situation." Zorn's eye stalk swiveled to fix Sarah and Mike with an unreadable gaze. "Indeed, though I must say, your methods are as unorthodox as ever, Agent Umbra." Sarah felt like her brain was short-circuiting. "Agent? Admiral, what the hell is going on here?" Zorn's tentacles rippled in what might have been a sigh. "I suppose you deserve an explanation. Agent Umbra here is one of our top operatives in the Galactic Intelligence Service. He was assigned to test Nexus Hub security protocols in preparation for the upcoming summit." Mike's jaw dropped. "You mean this whole thing was just an elaborate security drill?" "Oh, it was very real," Umbra corrected. "The danger to the station, the reactor instability, all of it. The best tests are the ones where the subjects don't know they're being tested." Sarah felt a bubble of hysterical laughter building in her chest. "So let me get this straight. We were sent here to probe for security weaknesses, only to end up chasing another agent who was doing the exact same thing." Zorn had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Not exactly. You see, we had reason to believe that there might be an actual threat to the summit, something our normal security protocols might miss. We needed fresh eyes." Umbra picked up the thread. "Operatives who would approach the problem from a completely different angle, Who better than a pair of human troublemakers with a knack for exposing systemic weaknesses? Mike ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. So all of this, the chaos, the panic, the reactor meltdown, it was all just to see how we'd react. Not just you, Zorn rumbled. The entire station. And I must say, the results have been illuminating. Sarah's mind was racing, piecing together the implications. The quiescent delegations confiscated Harmony crystals. Umbra nodded approvingly. A back door into the station's communications grid. Child's play for their tech specialists to exploit, if they'd been allowed to keep them. The malfunctioning environmental controls in the diplomatic quarter, Mike added, easily manipulated to incapacitate key personnel, Umbra confirmed. And the maintenance tunnels, Sarah finished. A massive security blind spot that any halfway competent infiltrator could exploit. Zorn's tentacles writhed in agitation. Precisely. Vulnerabilities that our standard security audits completely missed. Vulnerabilities that could have been catastrophic if exploited by genuine hostile agents. For a long moment, silence reigned in the engineering bay. Then, slowly, a grin began to spread across Sarah's face. "Well then, Admiral," she said, cracking her knuckles, "I'd say it's time we had a little chat about upgrading Nexus Hub's security protocols, and maybe a discussion about hazard pay while we're at it." Mike nodded emphatically. "And better food in the commissary. If I have to eat one more of those cardboard burgers, I might turn into a security threat myself." Umbra's laughter echoed off the high ceiling of the engineering bay. "Oh, I like these too, Zorn. I think we're going to have a very interesting time preparing for the summit." As the adrenaline of the chase faded, replaced by the budding excitement of a new challenge, Sarah couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They might not have been the heroes they thought they were, thwarting some dastardly plot. But they had proven themselves in ways they never expected, showcasing the unique problem-solving skills that made humans such valuable assets in the galactic community. They were Deathworlders, after all. Adapting to impossible situations wasn't just what they did, it was who they were. And as they followed Admiral Zorn out of the engineering bay, already debating the best ways to shore up Nexus Hub's defenses, Sarah knew one thing for certain. The upcoming summit was going to be anything but boring. Epilogue. 2 months later, as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the historic summit on Nexus Hub, very few were aware of the behind-the-scenes chaos that had preceded the event. Fewer still noticed the two unassuming humans who seemed to be everywhere at once, their eyes constantly scanning for potential threats or weaknesses. Sarah and Mike had thrown themselves into their new roles with characteristic enthusiasm, working alongside Umbra and a team of the galaxy's top security experts to transform Nexus Hub into an impregnable fortress. Well, mostly impregnable. They had insisted on leaving a few carefully monitored vulnerabilities, just to keep things interesting. As Sarah watched a group of TZATIC ambassadors waddle past, their mandibles clicking in animated conversation, she felt a presence materialize beside her. "Impressive work," Umbra murmured, his shadowy form blending seamlessly with the bustling crowd. "I must admit, I had my doubts about bringing humans into our operation. But your unique perspective has proven invaluable." Sarah smirked. "Admit it, you just like having someone around who can appreciate your flair for the dramatic. Speaking of which, how's the shoulder? Still sore from where Mike tagged you during that hostage situation drill last week?" Umbra's normally impassive features twitched in what might have been a wince. "I maintain that was a lucky shot. Your partner fights dirty." "We prefer to think of it as creative problem-solving," Mike chimed in, appearing on Sarah's other side with a tray of alarmingly colorful canapes. "Snack, anyone. I think these are supposed to be safe for human consumption. Mostly." As they bantered, keeping a watchful eye on the ebb and flow of galactic diplomacy happening around them, Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction. This, she realized, was where they belonged. Not filing reports on honey tariffs or playing pointless pranks, but here on the front lines, using their uniquely human talents to help shape the future of the galaxy. They were Deathworlders, yes, but more than that, they were innovators, problem solvers, and agents of controlled chaos in a universe that sometimes needed a little shaking up. And as the summit kicked into high gear, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Mike would be ready to face them head on. After all, that's what Deathworlders do best.